Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Dano, and I discuss anything within the realms of interior design, architecture, as well as anything creative. In this video, I will be covering some basics of color theory, as promised in my last video. So to begin, let's discuss one of the earliest explorations of color theory from the German poet, artist, and politician Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. His color wheel looks pretty similar to the traditional color wheel that was proposed and used by Johann Eden. One of his most radical points at the time was the refutation of Newton's ideas about the color spectrum, believing that instead that darkness is an active ingredient rather than the mere passive absence of light. So this basically means that light and its absence are essential to the production of color. Goethe also had several theories regarding the psychological impact of different colors on mood and emotion. So, for example, there's yellow, which is said to be the color closest to light and carries with it the nature of brightness and has a serene, jovial, softly exciting character. When liable to contamination or being sullied, like with a somewhat green appearance, it is unpleasant. There's red-yellow, changing yellow by condensing or darkening it. The color will increase in energy and appears more powerful and splendid. It gives a sense of warmth and gladness, like the intense glow of fire. Yellow-red, which is agreeable, cheerful, produces extreme excitement, and still acts somewhat darkened. It is also said to disturb and enrage animals, and sometimes can be seen as intolerable. Blue. This color has a peculiar and almost indescribable effect on the eye as it is powerful, but it is on the negative side and can stimulate negation. A blue surface tends to retire from us, but at the same time, it draws us after it. It gives an impression of cold and a reminiscence of shade. With an affinity for black, it can be gloomy or melancholy. Red-blue. Blue deepens mildly into red and obtains a somewhat active character, but it is still relatively on the passive side. It can disturb rather than enliven. Blue-red, intolerable in larger pieces, but in smaller pieces like clothing, it is attenuated and displays a character that is more attractive. Red, the junction of two contrasted extremes, which have gradually prepared themselves for a union in the color red. It has an impression of gravity and dignity at the same time as grace and attractiveness. Green. The union of the colors of yellow and blue, the eye experiences a distinctly grateful impression of this color. If combined equally, the eye and the mind will perceive a singular color and a simple color, and there is no wish nor power to imagine a state beyond it. Rooms to live in constantly usually use the color green. Moving on from this section, we get to the traditional color wheel created and proposed by the Swiss painter and teacher Johann Eden, who was a pivotal member of the Bauhaus art and design school in Germany. Eden's color wheel contained 12 colors, the three primary colors being red, yellow, and blue. Three secondary colors created by mixing one of the primaries together with another primary. So this gives you violet, orange, and green. And lastly, the six tertiary colors created by combining one primary and one secondary. So this would give you red-violet, blue-violet, red-orange, yellow-orange, blue-green, and lastly, yellow-green. Eden also utilized psychoanalysis to inform his theories, meaning that he studied the ways in which these colors impacted a person as well as the individual's perception of these colors. To expand on this color wheel, there are four defining qualities of a color. One being hue, generally defined as a source color or one of the 12 basic colors on the color wheel. Two being value, the lightness or darkness of the color relative to white, black, or gray. Three being intensity, the brightness or dullness of a color, often determined by the amount of white or complement that has been mixed with it. You can also see the words chroma or Saturation used instead of intensity. I personally prefer using saturation as it is a bit easier for me to remember because you could just think of how saturated the color is. And lastly, 4, which is temperature, how warm or cool the color is. With warm colors generally being yellow, orange, red, and brown, and cool colors being blue, violet, green, and grays. This topic forms a bridge between color contrasts. Eden helped create and develop the 7 color contrasts, one being the contrast of saturation. Saturation in this context referring to the degree of purity of a color. This type of contrast is a juxtaposition of pure, intense colors and dull colors. 2 being the contrast of light and dark, light values being juxtaposed by dark values. Think of just regular graphite drawings or even pen and ink drawings that are just one color. 3 being the contrast of extension, also known as contrast of proportion, with this being based on the relative areas of 2 or more areas of color, like large and small pieces. 4 being complementary contrast, when 2 complementary colors, which are colors opposite of each other on the color wheel, are placed side by side. 5 being simultaneous contrast, which occurs when opposing colors are placed next to each other, creating the illusion of vibrations or shadows. 6 being contrast of hue, the easiest to identify, and it is created by the juxtaposition of different hues. Eden believed that the intensity of the contrast will lower as the hues move farther away from the primary colors, so this basically means that the most extreme examples of this type of contrast would be with the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And lastly, contrast of warm and cool. When colors that are warm or cool are juxtaposed, warm colors evoke a sense or a feeling of warmth and comfort that are typically attractive to the viewer. As a result of this, warm colors will tend to move toward the viewer and forward. Cool colors tend to recede into the background and appear heavier or darker. Psychologically, Eden found that cool colors were associated with sadness and melancholy. Next up, we have the Munsell color system. The Munsell color system essentially combines all of these different aspects into a type of 3D or three-dimensional color wheel based around hue, value, and chroma, or saturation or intensity as mentioned before. Value is a vertical axis from 0 being the blackest to 10 being the whitest. There are 5 principal hues, which are red, yellow, green, blue, and violet, or purple, and a ring around this axis to define hues. There are then larger or smaller concentric rings or circles to define the saturation or chroma to give additional colors. All of these types of color systems are referred to as subtractive color mixing because you are mixing materials, typically pigments, inks, or dyes. This type of mixing is subtractive because the more colors you mix, the darker the color gets. So you are essentially subtracting certain wavelengths of light that are reflected to your eyes. For printing, the CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, color system is used with K being black, where black is used for better blending and it is cheaper. The subtractive color primaries are CMY, cyan, magenta, yellow for printing, and RYB, red, yellow, blue. This is essentially used by the employment of white light being refracted or split into the visible light spectrum, which we learned in school being Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Additive color mixing works by mixing colors of light. The more colors of light that you add together, the closer you get to achieving white light. This is the reverse process of splitting white light, which we just mentioned with subtractive color mixing. The additive primary colors are RGB, red, green, and blue, as these are the colors from which all other colors of light are made of. This can be seen on computers, TVs, phones, etc., as the pixels emit light in different colors based on how much of each primary is emitted from each pixel. Now let's combine these two systems of additive and subtractive mixing to visualize the perception of hue on materials for interiors. Say that you have a flat wall painted a muted blue hue, which is low in saturation and moderate in value, that is a few feet away from a window that is west-facing and the time of day is around 5 p.m. in November. How will the incoming light from the setting sun impact the perception of this color on the wall? It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but since you are tying many different aspects of color theory together, you would essentially get an answer similar to this. Due to the time of day and year, the angle of the setting sun's rays will travel through more of the Earth's atmosphere, which would in turn scatter shorter wavelengths of light like blue, violet, and green, making the light coming into the space appear more orange, yellow, and red. When this amber-colored light hits the muted blue hue on the wall, the resulting color would appear more of a muted brown or even gray color. The blue paint will absorb wavelengths of red-yellow light, which are the exact ones that are shining upon it, neutralizing the colors to reflect back a muted tone to appear even more muted or even slightly gray. This is a bit of a leap forward in color theory since you are combining several aspects together in order to simulate the perception of colors through a real-world example. However, this process is used all the time by hairstylists, artists, photographers, designers, physicists, etc. The process will more than likely come off a bit convoluted at first, but upon application through paint mixing or even light mixing with spotlights or LEDs, you'll begin to see specific effects take place with specific variables. Moreover, depending on the time of year, spring, summer, fall, or winter, and the time of day that you are designing for, you will also have to account for the angle of the sun, its intensity, and the color of light that will be present. Additionally, the perception of color is entirely dependent on the culture that you are a part of, because what we see and associate here within Western culture in the United States with various colors and what we associate with those colors, they will obviously be different compared to what Eastern cultures associate the same colors with, for example. These concepts are even more important when designing for clients who may be visually impaired to various degrees. Say that you have a client who is colorblind where some of the color cones in their retinas are impacted, making colors that you pick appear entirely different than how you perceive them as a designer. Or you may have to specify specific materials that have more or less texture, so your client can differentiate what is what and what is where. And this could be due to, say, their rod cells in their retinas being impacted as well. These topics are pretty important both within design but various other aspects of life, so I'm planning on creating some shorter videos in the future to dig a bit deeper. Well, I hope that y'all were able to keep up with this video. It's pretty expansive and I definitely talked about a lot of different color systems. This is pretty much all that I have for y'all today, so let me know down in the comments if you want me to expand on certain points or certain topics, and I'll see you on the next one. Ciao, y'all!